Absolute power corrupts absolutely is a statement that echoes through history. Many people enter the halls of power with good intentions, but the road to hell is also paved on them. The question that remains is, when people gain power, fame, attention, or a combination of them, does it change them, or show exactly who they were the entire time? Today we ask that question about FBI Director Kash Patel. Hi, I'm Crate13, and I'm 100% certain today's comment section will remain completely civil and respectful. But we already know who we're talking about, so let's hop right into it. Kashyap Pramand Patel was born on February 25th, 1980. He was born to a family of immigrants that fled from Uganda. You see, many Indians lived in Uganda from both nations' time under British rule. Indians served an intermediary role between the British and native Ugandans and used this position to accumulate massive amounts of wealth and power in the country. That was until famous Scotsman Idi Amin came to power and expelled all of them from Uganda. So Kash's parents applied for asylum and eventually settled down in New York. It was here Kashyap would be raised a Hindu in Garden Springs. He would grow up to attend the University of Richmond, where he would gain a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and history. He would then go on to graduate from Pace University of Law in 2005. Patel would begin to work as a public defender for Miami-Dade County until 2012, when he would become a junior staff member for the Department of Justice. He was briefly on the prosecution team of the Benghazi case when our embassy was raided and 4 Americans were killed, but he was removed due to disagreements he was having with other members of the prosecution. He would move on to be a national security prosecutor and would fly across the world prosecuting cases, but would end up leaving this job in 2017 for what he claimed was disagreements with the DOJ's handling of the 2016 election. But other people feel like it was because Kash didn't feel like he was supported by his bosses when he was thrown out of a Texas courtroom for having a messed up suit. And he had this messed up suit because he was coming from a flight from Tajikistan straight to the courtroom. But regardless, he was moving on. And Kash's past is important because he was never some kind of famous FBI agent. He was always just a lawyer. But he leaves the DOJ and begins to work under Congressman Devin Nunes. Nunes was the Republican representative for California's 22nd District and importantly sat on the House Committee on Intelligence and was its chair. This was important because 2016 was a weird year. Crate13 was an edgy middle schooler, Harambe was dead, and Trump shocked the entire world by winning the election. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say my disclosure for YouTube's sake right here. I'm not making any statements on U.S. election integrity. I'm not saying that there's any interference or that any U.S. election has ever been stolen. I'm simply covering history and the legal and congressional hearings involving such topics. Democracy is 100% infallible and the U.S. election process could never be taken advantage of. Okay, hopefully YouTube shows mercy to me now. Back to it. The Democrats were angry, to say the least. So allegations that Russian interference in the US election had occurred sprang up. Specifically, that this interference was coordinated with the Trump campaign. Look, if you're anything like me, you're probably still tired of hearing this for what felt like every single day between 2017 and 2021. So please forgive me, but I'm only going to go into as much detail as required for this story about Kash Patel. But if you would like for me to break down the entire interference story in a different video, let me know in the comments. Congress starts launching investigations because many on the other side of the aisle claim that they were just a hoax to ruin Trump's presidency. They would also claim foul play by the FBI under the Obama administration by abusing a FISA warrant to spy on the Trump administration. Well, Devin Nunes and his committee would get to work on the veracity of these claims. And Nunes would task Kash Patel with authoring the 4-page report that his committee would come out and release. The Nunes memo was released, and they alleged the FBI under then-Commissioner James Comey had acted under political motivations to surveil the Trump campaign as well as during the entire investigation. The memo didn't prove anything for either side, but it was a big deal because it was an oversight committee, saying the FBI went too far in surveilling an American citizen. And on the flip side, it was Democrats saying that an oversight committee was hindering an investigation. It's a disagreement that persists to this day, and it's an entire debacle that I find very exhausting. But this was the moment that sparked Kash Patel's future. It not only put him in the national spotlight, but it also gave him very strong convictions. Or so it would seem. He truly believed the FBI had been weaponized against a political candidate, and he wanted to not only expose it, but arrest those responsible for ruining the reputation of the FBI. And he would get his chance soon after when he was brought on board to the National Security Council. He worked under John Bolton, who was instructed by Trump that Patel was a must-hire. He was placed the director of counter-T-wordism during his time on the National Security Council. Now, again, you can have your opinions on Kash. I certainly have mine. But it was here employees would actively not share information with him because he would break the bureaucratic chain and share important info directly with the president, instead of letting it go through different committees and official messenger channels. Which is just dumb to be mad at him for that and then actively work against him in that capacity. Again, plenty of things to be mad at about him coming down later in the video. But in my humble opinion, this isn't one of them. But I'm biased. I hate bureaucracy with a passion. But Patel would go from working with a hostile staff to gutting national intelligence agencies from what he saw as bloat. Now, Trump is famously volatile with members of his cabinet, and Defense Secretary Mark Esper was fired in the waning days of Trump's first term. So Chris Miller was made the acting defense secretary, and Kash Patel was named the chief of staff of the Department of Defense under Miller. Which, this would only last for basically 2 months, but it was an invaluable experience as he prepped the DoD for the transfer under Joe Biden. Also, for some reason, Mike Lindell, yes, the MyPillow guy, was photographed in the last days of the Trump administration with a note saying Kash Patel should be made the acting CIA director. It's not an important detail, but it was random enough to mention. But 2021 rolls around and Patel is out of a job. But he would actually be pretty successful. He would be the director of Trump Media Group, which is over Trump's social media app, Truth Social, and also was a consultant for Sheen's parent company for some reason. He would use these funds to start the Kash Foundation, a nonprofit to provide support for people arrested over January 6th. But during this time is really when Kash was starting to enter the public spotlight, by becoming a conservative media figure. He would host Kash's Corner, where he would discuss plenty of different theories as well as different ways to bring down the inflated government. This was on Epoch TV, which is the anti-CCP channel owned by Falun Gong, which is a whole other crazy situation I can make a video on. Anyways, he would do this and start to get a major public following, especially on his takes on the Big E. It's going to be a miracle if this video gets pushed because YouTube doesn't like me saying this guy's name, but he's the financier whose name rhymes with Einstein. Kash was one of the most vocal voices demanding the full release of the files and everyone associated with them. So when Trump announced one of his many campaign promises was to release the files, people were beginning to be hopeful. He was talking about completely eliminating the deep state and arresting dozens, if not hundreds of politicians that had been complacent and involved with the financier. Not to mention many of the books that he would publish talking about the events surrounding the 2020 election. He would speak at events all over the nation, and at one of these events, he would meet Alexis Wilkins, who soon after would become his girlfriend, which is going to be a very important detail later. But I'm saying all this to say that he was becoming incredibly popular with the growing populist movement sweeping across the country at the time. Kash was saying everything right to the Trump base at this time, and Donald saw this. He made it clear that if he was elected in 2024, Kash Patel would have a major cabinet position in his new government. And November 2024 came around, and Donald Trump won the election. The Republicans took the House and Senate. The Biden-era censorship was over. Inflation was going to end. No more forever wars. And the criminals in Washington are going to be prosecuted by the new FBI director, Kash Patel. The new golden age of America is upon us. Except none of that happened. And in fact, in a lot of those cases, the exact opposite occurred. Kash barely slipped by his approval vote, with the final number coming in 51 in favor, 49 against. He would swear in under oath on the Bhagavad Gita held by Pam Bondi, and from the get-go, he would be pretty controversial. Patel had spent years arguing the FBI had too much power and was not transparent enough with the public, so many feared he would reform the agency. And he made it clear he was going to make some big changes by moving the FBI headquarters out of the J. Edgar Hoover building with the plan to turn it into a museum for the deep state. Which, that's fair. It's voted by Americans every year as the most ugly building in the entire nation. But critics were scared that he was too much of a Trump ally and wouldn't be able to be impartial as FBI director. Which the counter-argument to that is that James Comey never gave the Clintons proper investigation under the Obama administration. But to understand Kash Patel, we have to understand one idea that runs through almost his entire career. The federal government can become dangerous when people operating it stop being accountable. Patel supporters see this as the central lesson of Russiagate. His critics see it as an obsession that has shaped his entire political worldview. But regardless of which interpretation you accept, it explains why Patel's vision for the FBI is so different from that of many of his predecessors. He doesn't appear to view the Bureau simply as an institution that needs better management. He views it as an institution that needs to be reoriented. The first priority is the FBI's basic law enforcement mission. Patel has repeatedly emphasized violent crime, terrorism, and drug trafficking as other threats that he believes should receive greater attention. That may sound conventional, but underneath it is a criticism of the modern FBI. Patel has argued the Bureau became too focused on political and ideological investigations and not focused enough on traditional criminal enforcement. In his view, the Russia investigation became the ultimate example of that problem. The FBI had enormous resources. It had access to classified intelligence and surveillance authorities. And yet, Patel believes senior officials allowed political considerations to influence how those powers were used. So reforming the FBI isn't simply about changing its priorities, it's about changing its culture. And that brings us to Patel's second major theme, transparency. Patel has spent years advocating for the release of classified government records connected to controversial investigations. His argument is relatively simple. If the government used extraordinary powers against American citizens, the public should eventually be allowed to see how and why those powers were used. That philosophy has made Patel popular among people who believe the national security establishment has operated with too little accountability. But it also creates an obvious problem. Intelligence agencies deal with information that cannot be released. Sources and methods have to be protected. And sometimes even acknowledging that an investigation exists can compromise national security. So Patel's challenge is finding the line between transparency and national security. And his third priority is probably his most controversial, being political independence. Patel has repeatedly argued the FBI can never be used as a political weapon again. And that sounds like a principle that everyone could agree with. The disagreement comes from how you define what political weaponization is. Patel believes that Russiagate demonstrated that federal law enforcement crossed that line. His critics argue that Patel's own rhetoric about investigating political opponents creates the possibility of exactly the same problem from the opposite direction. This is where Patel's tenure becomes especially interesting. Because if his specific argument is that law enforcement shouldn't be used for political retaliation, then his success will ultimately be decided by who he investigates that he's politically aligned with, and the people he isn't. And then there is another layer under all this, because Patel is not trying to reform the FBI in isolation. His career has placed him inside a much larger movement that has spent nearly a decade challenging America's intelligence and law enforcement institutions. For his supporters, that movement represents a necessary reckoning with a government bureaucracy that has become too powerful. And that's why Kash Patel matters. He is the product of a political war over the American intelligence community that began in the 2016 election and never really ended. And ultimately, Patel is left with a problem that every reformer faces. Can you change the institutions without becoming a part of the same institutions? And that may be the real story of Kash Patel. And that became abundantly clear in the debacle over the e-file releases. Kash Patel was one of the biggest voices before taking office, saying there is no way that the finance guy did the thing, I can't say on YouTube, to himself in the prison cell. But the minute he took office, he immediately hit a 180. He sang the party line that he did in fact meet his end by doing the thing himself in his own cell. And in fact, there was no conspiracy at all. But don't worry, he would release footage showing that no one entered his room, but you can't release through the door, and a minute was edited out of the video, so yeah, nothing fishy there at all. Okay, well, he would release the files, but only after the president and himself claimed that they didn't even exist, and Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna passed a bill legally requiring him to, and he still hasn't fully released them, and redacted thousands of images and names that legally shouldn't be redacted, and just retroactively has been deleting files from the public folder. But Kash, he had the perfect idea for damage control. He would go on the Joe Rogan Experience and lay everything clean out on the table. And he would look terrible on JRE. His entire defense was, trust me, bro, if anyone would tell you, it'd be me.
If I had a shred, me, Kash Patel, had a shred of evidence, the Russiagate guy, the Jan 6 guy, the COVID origins guy, had a shred of evidence that this guy was murdered, I would be the first guy to bring this case hard and fast. And I would even doing press conferences every week on it. Mm-hmm. The first guy. That's what I'm asking people to play out to their logical conclusion. I'm not Comey. I'm not McCabe. I'm not the guy that was in the seat before. I have a wildly different background. I've been putting out the truth my entire career. Why would I risk all of it on this guy?
And he looked extremely shady and like he was lying and even scared the entire time he was giving the interview. No one, and I mean absolutely no one, believed him, especially after this. Which gave us this really bad scenario where in the absolute best case scenario, he's just protecting some of the worst criminal monsters in human history. And if not, he's a part of those monsters.
You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy this and not join them!
But this wouldn't be the only investigation that Kash would fumble. We only have to look nearly a year ago to Utah Valley University, where political commentator Charlie Kirk was assassinated in broad daylight. Patel's handling of this case so far has been not good, to say the least. To announcing they had called the shooter multiple times when they hadn't, to demanding the FBI jacket to wear for the press conference, to having multiple pieces of evidence that make zero sense when examined critically, like the fact they claim a .30-06 round is what hit Charlie, to the fact that he claimed the shooter assembled the rifle, fired, disassembled it, jumped off the roof with the rifle in his pants, then reassembled it and left it in a bush. Oh, and this cringy statement.
To my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch. And I'll see you in Valhalla.
Oh, and not to mention letting the active crime scene be completely paved over by the university within the same week of the shooting happening. All terrible handling. But Kash also has a lot of criticism around how he spends government resources on himself and his girlfriend. From assigning FBI agents as her personal bodyguards to using a government jet to go watch one of her country music shows. There is no shortage of criticism. We also have a bunch of videos and pictures of Patel slamming beers with the US hockey team after beating Canada in the Winter Olympics to win gold, which I get is a bad look for somebody as high of a position as him, but I also kind of get that one. And because of these reasons, many analysts believe that Kash Patel is next on the chopping block to be eliminated from the Trump administration. Now, let's bring this back to Kash Patel's girlfriend real quick, because it's no secret that she's a very pretty woman. And Kash Patel is Kash Patel. Many people have brought up them meeting was at a weird time because it was right before he was made FBI director and right before he had the complete 180 switch on the E-Man. Conservative influencer Samuel Parker made the claim that Alexis Wilkins was an Israeli agent being used as a honeypot to compromise Kash Patel. Alexis Wilkins sued Parker for $5 million in a defamation suit that was thrown out of court this week. It was because it was filed in the wrong state, but we'll see how it plays out. Kash has also sued a lot of people, including someone for defamation because they said he was a googly-eyed Kremlin bitch and blatantly incompetent chut, which I think is just kind of funny to mention. So Kash, Alexis, I'm making zero allegations about either of you in this video. I'm just a hyper niche YouTuber making a video about how you failed to arrest anybody from the files. I meant to mention that Kash Patel also has some pretty cringy merch. Unlike myself, I have a plethora of designs that are both Crate 13 branded or just stuff that I thought looked cool, and I'll link it below in the video description. We shall see if YouTube decides they want to push this video or not. I don't have a lot of hope for it. But if you enjoy this video, please take a moment to like it, hype it up, maybe comment down below who or what you would want me to cover in the next video. If you want to go just a step further, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 5K, and it would be really cool to hit that before the channel's 1-year anniversary. And if you want to just go a teeny weeny bit further, join the channel membership. You get access to the Discord and your name feature right here with all these other beautiful people. Other than that, I hope you enjoy whatever food you decided to eat or whatever poop you decided to poop when you sat down to watch this video. I'm Crate 13, and rest now, brothers. We have the watch. I'll see you all in Valhalla.